made a mistake. I just looked at the light up. So now I can't see you. Good, thank you. I know you're here now. Re'eh. That's actually, it's funny because I can't see. Re'eh. Look. See. Ani noten lefanechem hayom. I place before you today. Bracha v'klala. A blessing and a curse. These are the words, the very words that are the first words of this week's Torah portion. These are the words that have been with me all week long. These are the words that have popped into my mind every time I heard a bit of news in whichever news media I was connected to at the time. Look, I place before you a blessing and a curse. It kind of was eerie because without wanting it to be, this became the mantra of my life this week. I came to realize that really this is not a sentence, a phrase that was said 3,000 years ago to a nation of people, the Hebrews, as they were encamped still with Moses at the edge of the promised land. No, these words, like it says, were spoken to me today, and then today, and then today, on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, today. I came to realize that we are faced with blessings and curses at every moment of our life. That contrary to what appears to be linear, there is no blessing here and then sometimes later a curse happens, or vice versa. I came to realize that curses and blessings happen all at once, simultaneously. We don't recognize them sometimes because we're so involved or engrossed in the blessing in our life right now that we don't know or see that there may be some cursing going on. Sometimes we are so collapsed, so devastated by maybe the curse we are experiencing in our life that we can't perceive, can't know the blessing that also is arising at the same time. But the truth of the matter is, they are both two sides of the same coin. I mean, I could give you 1,000 examples that popped into my mind through this week, and it's examples that could span this last week, but they could span the last 2 years, 3 years, however you want to count. So I'm just going to do a few, if you allow me. Let's start with blessings. It's always nicer. Re'eh, look. In just the last generation, not even the last generation, the last 5-10 years, we have managed to move beyond the legal discrimination against the LGBTQ community. That is a blessing. If we look just as what has been going on in the past few months, past few years, we see the beginning of the arising of consciousness around the genocide that we perpetrated against the native people of this land. I mean, this past year, many of us showed up in support of the First Nations as they gathered together at Standing Rock. We understood that their fight was our fight, that there was no real separation. And beautiful words of atonement began to be shared with them. I pray that this is the beginning of an awakening, the beginning of a beautiful blessing that might heal our nation. we are beginning a process. I mean, we are seeing it this week to heal, to confront the racist past on which this nation is founded, the racism that is the background of these United States of America. Just first steps, but they count. Every step counts. We as white folks are beginning to wake up to the white privileges that we have benefited from all these generations. And that in not only white privilege, but white male privilege. And that has revived the struggle for women's rights, that has revived the struggle for non-white, for immigrants' rights as well. Small steps, but important steps. All showing us that consciousness is evolving. Consciousness is growing. In those kinds of manifest blessings in our society, in our world. Because when consciousness evolves, when consciousness moves forward, the correlate to that is enlarging, a widening, a broadening of the circle of inclusion. And that's what we are seeing. Okay, now, the flip side of the coin. Re'eh, look. There are too many people who are suffering in this land. Statisticians are telling us that the gap between the haves and the have-not has never been wider. In fact, we would have to go all the way back to the Civil War to come to the same kind of statistics that we are seeing. Less and less people can afford a future for their children, can afford college. Since the downturn of the economy, we've seen states cut their budgets and slash the budget of those organizations that are supporting those most in need. Like I said earlier, when we spoke of the tzedakah, there is what is now called a homelessness crisis that affects young and old alike. And that could go on and on, obviously. The list doesn't end here. But all of this has created a lot of anger in our nation. All of this has created a lot of anxiety, a real deep, profound malaise throughout the land. That is the symptom of which, really, one of the symptoms of which is what we see as this opioid epidemic that is decimating our communities, our families. And historically, when we have seen consciousness move towards creating a multicultural, a multi-ethnic, a multi-religious community, this has historically triggered the rise of white populism. And when it's coupled with an economic downturn, when it's coupled with a financial crash, it's not just white populism that we see rising, but we see white supremacist movements gain ground everywhere. We've seen this before. We've been there, unfortunately, many times before. Molly, I didn't want to tell you that, but... And that is what we are seeing today. And these groups, these Nazis, these neo-Nazis, these white supremacists, as we see, they're not attacking, the elites, the corporate elites, the political elites, that those who are really standing on the top of the last rung of the social ladder, that in fact are responsible for all of our suffering. Instead, they are attacking those they feel are the greatest threat to them, which are the people that are either just below or at the same level they are on that ladder, that social ladder. Why? And often those that are together with them at that level are the people that are the non-white, that are the immigrants, and those who are both non-white and immigrants in their eyes and also represent that elite against which they're really upset, the Jews. But why? Why? Because nobody wants to be at the lowest rung of the social ladder. Nobody wants to be at the lowest rung of the social ladder. And so what they will do is try to keep down or push down those who are at the same level as they are. And they will direct their ire and their anger at them. It's easier. And that's what we're seeing happening in front of our eyes yet again. The same patterns, the same truths. So what are we to do? Here we are Friday night after a very long week. A very long week. And I'm sure all of us are scratching our heads. What are we going to do? What is our tradition saying? What is the Torah saying this week about what way to move forward so that we do not repeat what happens just 70 years ago? In a couple, maybe 3 or 4 Torah portions from now, we will study together the Torah portion called Nitzavim. And Nitzavim is telling us that we, each of us, have to take a stand. We have to stand in the face of what is going on in our nation today. We are to be the voice for the voiceless. We have to be the strength for those who don't have the strength. I'm talking about political strength. I'm talking about the strength of the economy, whatever. We are to stand for those who cannot stand, and we have to stand as well for ourselves. For ourselves. Just like we read, in the Amidah just a second or two ago. We are the one through which, well, we can read it together. We are the ones who lift up the fallen. It's in our prayer books. We are the ones who release the confined. This is our work. In our tradition, we call it tikkun olam, the healing of society, the healing of the world, working towards creating together a just and compassionate society. That is our work. To increase compassion, to enlarge even more the circle of inclusion, to embrace more. But the tradition also tells us very clearly that work that we can do at the physical, the mind-body level is never going to be enough. It's never going to be enough because it will ignore a whole aspect of what it is to be a human being. There needs to be a spiritual component to the work we would be doing to heal our society. Work in the political world, in the social world, will always be missing its soul if it is devoid of soul. And we are also not in our tradition told to, just climb up the spiritual mountain and just stay there. because it's so nice to sit with God and drink tea. Now, we are told, like Moses did, to take the 10 Commandments, take whatever we receive, whatever awakening we receive, and come down the mountain with the 10 Commandments. We always have to come down the mountains. And believe me, in the whole story, Moses sometimes didn't want to come down the mountains. Like, what are you doing, God? I don't want to be with these people. They argue, they are crazy, yeah. Nonetheless, we have to come down the mountain, but we also have to climb up the mountain. We cannot avoid doing that either, because we're going to dry ourselves out. And the spiritual practices that our tradition invites us into is a practice of introspection. Because whatever we are seeing in the world is a reflection of what is going on within ourselves. The parts of ourselves that are exclusionary. The parts of ourselves that are racists. The part of ourselves that fail to acknowledge our white privileges. The part of ourselves that fail to know the miser within. We are to shed the light of awareness to the darkest corner of our being so that we can heal these parts of self. Because time and again, our sages have told us that the work, whatever work is at hand, can only begin right here, right now, with us. That's where it all starts. And if we can couple this personal work, this deeply spiritual work that is hard as hell, because nobody wants to take a look at that in ourselves. We'd rather ignore it. But if we can couple this hard work, that is the work that is called to be done within, and translating that into the work of our hands, of our mouth on the outside, then we stand a chance to transform our world, to transform ourselves, to transform our society. I'm going to leave you with a caveat. And because we need to acknowledge that and be conscious of that just as much. The time is here and the time is now. There is no tomorrow for this. We're running out of time, actually. So we need to take this very seriously. But we also need to know that whatever we succeed in manifesting in this world through this kind of work, whatever the next evolution of consciousness, the next evolution of our society, of our nation, we need to know that that too will come with blessings and curses. And despite that fact, we cannot desist from doing the work altogether. That cannot scare us from doing the work nonetheless. So this is my invitation on this Shabbat, to look at the curses that we are faced with day in and day out, and to learn from that curse, from whatever we see as a curse, to respond to that curse by seeking within ourselves what is the appropriate blessing that can be the right response to that curse. To not answer curse with curse. We can never get to peace through war. We can never get to reconciliation through hatred. What is the blessing that we are called upon to manifest into our world in response to the curses that we perceive?